in the floating city of Oralis, where the remnants of humanity had sought refuge from a ravaged Earth. The air tasted of metal and desperation. The year was 2287, and the world below was no longer the blue-green sphere of ancient history books, but a scarred wasteland, the result of ecological catastrophe and pandemic from the stars. The city hung in the sky like a tarnished jewel, its upper tiers gleaming with the promise of prosperity, while the lower levels festered in shadow. It was in one of these shadows that Shaler huddled, her thin arms wrapped around bony knees. At 12 years old, she had already learned the cruelty of the world. Her features, pale skin with a faint bluish undertone, eyes too large and too dark, fingers slightly elongated with an extra joint, marked her as neither fully human nor fully alien. She was something in between, a child of two worlds. And in Oralis, such hybridity was worse than a curse. The facility had been her home for as long as she could remember. The Children's Integration Center, they called it, though integration was the furthest thing from what happened within its sterile walls. For years, she had been passed over by potential adoptive parents who recoiled at the sight of her, until the Nguyens. They had seemed different. Mrs. Nguyen had even smiled at her, a real smile that reached her eyes. For 3 months, Sheeler had known what it felt like to have a room of her own, to eat meals at a table, to hear good night before sleeping. But then came the incident with the floating teacup. Shaler hadn't meant to do it. She'd been reaching for it. And suddenly, there it was, hovering in the air between her outstretched hand and the table. Mrs. Nguyen had screamed. Mr. Nguyen had called someone. And within hours, Shaler was back at the facility, only to be informed the next morning that she was no longer eligible for residential care. Psionic manifestation is a Class A biosecurity threat, the director had said, not looking at her as she signed the discharge papers. You're lucky they're not sending you to a research facility. Lucky. Sheeler almost laughed at the memory. Lucky to be homeless at 12. Lucky to be hungry and afraid and alone. A drone hummed overhead, its scanner sweeping the alley where she hid. Sheeler pressed herself deeper into the shadow of a waste disposal unit. The Purity Directorate had eyes everywhere, especially in the lower tiers. They were always watching, always searching for anomalies like her. When the drone passed, Sheeler crept out and continued her journey through the labyrinthine underbelly of Oralis. She had heard whispers of a place where people like her, the unwanted, the different, could find refuge. A place at the edge of the city, where the rules were less rigid. She had nothing but this rumor to guide her, but it was better than waiting to be discovered by the directorate. The lower-tier markets buzzed with activity as evening fell. Holographic signs flickered, advertising synthetic foods and mood-altering substances. Shaler kept her head down, and her hands tucked into the pockets of her oversized jacket. Her stomach growled painfully as she passed a stall selling steamed buns. "Hey, you!" The vendor's voice cut through the noise. "I see you eyeing my goods. Move along if you can't pay." Scheller quickened her pace, but not before catching the disgusted look on the vendor's face as he noticed her features. She heard him mutter, half-breed, under his breath, followed by a string of curses. She was so focused on escaping that she didn't notice the group of teenagers until she collided with one of them. The impact sent her sprawling onto the dirty street. "Watch where you're going, freak!" A tall boy spat, his eyes narrowing as he took in her appearance. "Sorry," Sheeler mumbled, scrambling to her feet. "Sorry?" the boy mocked. "You hear that? The alien spawn is sorry." His friends laughed, forming a circle around her. Sheeler felt her heart racing. The familiar pressure built behind her eyes. the precursor to her psionic abilities manifesting. No, not here. Not now. She fought to control it, knowing that revealing her powers would be a death sentence. Leave her alone. The voice was quiet, but firm. The teenagers turned to see a middle-aged man standing a few feet away. He was unremarkable in appearance, average height, thin build, with graying hair and tired eyes. But there was something in his stance that made the boys hesitate. "This isn't your business, old man," the tall boy said. But there was uncertainty in his voice. "I'm making it my business," the man replied. He stepped forward, and Sheila noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The boys must have felt it too, because they backed away. "Whatever. She's not worth the trouble anyway." The tall boy gestured to his friends, and they moved off, casting resentful glances over their shoulders. Sheila remained frozen, unsure whether to thank the stranger or run. He might help her now, only to turn her in later. "Are you hurt?" the man asked, keeping a respectful distance. Sheila shook her head. "Hungry, though, I'd guess." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a credit chip. "Here. It's not much, but it should get you a meal." Sheila stared at the chip, suspicion warring with desperate hunger. "It's not a trick," the man said softly. "I know what it's like to be hungry." Something in his voice, a shared understanding of suffering, made Sheila reach out and take the chip. "Thank you," she whispered. The man nodded. "I'm Tam. If you need help again, I work at the community clinic near the base of Sector 4. Before Sheila could respond, a public announcement blared through the market. "Attention citizens of Oralis. The Purity Directorate reminds you that harboring unregistered hybrids or individuals with genetic anomalies is a serious offense. Report suspicious individuals to your nearest security node." Tam's expression darkened. "Be careful," he said simply, then turned and walked away, blending into the crowd. Sheila clutched the credit chip, watching him go. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. The credit chip bought her a bowl of synthetic noodles and a night in a capsule hostel. It wasn't much. The capsule was barely long enough for her to stretch out, and the noodles tasted of chemicals. But it was better than another night on the streets. As she lay in the narrow space, listening to the snores and murmurs of other occupants, Sheila allowed herself to think of Tom. There had been kindness in his eyes, not pity, not disgust, but genuine kindness. It was so rare that Sheila wasn't sure she could trust her judgment. Perhaps he was a directorate informant, using a different approach to catch people like her. Or perhaps he wanted to exploit her in some other way. The world had taught Sheila that altruism was usually a mask for something darker. But the alternative, continuing alone, with no guidance and no ally, was increasingly daunting. The credit chip would only last another day, maybe 2 if she was careful. After that, she would be back to scavenging and hiding. The next morning, Sheila made her decision. She would find the community clinic and observe Tam from a distance. If he seemed trustworthy, she would approach him. If not, she would continue her search for the rumored safe haven. The clinic was easy to find. A small, unassuming building with a faded sign announcing Sector 4 Community Health Center. Sheila watched from across the street as people entered and exited, mostly residents of the lower tiers, many showing signs of the environmental illnesses that plagued those who couldn't afford proper filtration systems. After several hours of observation, she saw Tam emerge, looking even more tired than he had the day before. He spoke briefly with an elderly woman, handing her a small package, before starting down the street. Sheila followed at a distance. Tam's route took him through increasingly narrow and decrepit streets until he reached a small apartment complex on the very edge of Sector 4. The building looked as if it might have been elegant once, but years of neglect had left it crumbling. Shaler watched as Tam entered, noting the worn keypad by the door. She waited for night to fall before approaching the building. The hunger that had briefly been sated was gnawing at her again, making her dizzy. She hesitated at the entrance, then finally gathered her courage and pressed the button for Tam's apartment. There was a long silence, then a crackle of static. "Yes," Tam's voice came through the ancient intercom. It's the girl from yesterday," Shaler said, her voice barely audible. Another pause, then the door buzzed open. Shaler entered cautiously, climbing the stairs to the third floor where Tam stood waiting in an open doorway. "I thought you might come," he said simply, stepping aside to let her in. Tam's apartment was small but clean, with minimal furniture and walls lined with physical books, a rarity in the digital age. A small cooking unit in the corner emitted the smell of real vegetables, making Shaler's mouth water. "Sit," Tam said, gesturing to a chair at a small table. "You look about to collapse." Shaler sat, her eyes darting around the room, mapping escape routes out of habit. "I'm not going to hurt you or report you," Tam said, seeming to read her thoughts. He placed a bowl of steaming vegetable stew in front of her. "Eat. Then we can talk." The stew was the most delicious thing Shaler had ever tasted. Real ingredients were expensive, especially in the lower tiers. Yet Tam had shared his without hesitation. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, while Tam sat across from her with his own bowl, not pressuring her to speak. When she had finished, Shaler finally met Tam's gaze. "Why are you helping me?" Tam set down his spoon. "Because someone should," he said simply. "And because I know what the directorate does to children like you." Shaler tensed. "What do you mean, children like me?" "Hybrids," Tam said. "And those with psionic abilities." Fear shot through Shaler like ice. "I don't—" Tam raised a hand. "You don't need to deny it. I'm a doctor, or was before the directorate revoked my license. I worked with children affected by the xenomorph genome integration. I recognize the signs." Shaler's heart pounded. "Are you going to experiment on me?" Tam's expression softened. "No. I want to help you control it. The psionic energy. It's dangerous, not just because the directorate fears it, but because it can harm you if it's not properly channeled." "How do you know all this?" Tam was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "My son," he finally said. "He was like you, not a hybrid, but he developed psionic abilities after exposure to xenomorph biofluids. I tried to help him hide it. But the directorate found out," Shaler guessed. Tam nodded. "They took him for research purposes. That was 5 years ago. I haven't seen him since." The pain in his voice was raw, making Shaler uncomfortable. She wasn't used to adults showing vulnerability. "I'm sorry," she said awkwardly. "It's not your fault." Tam refocused on her. "But I can help you avoid the same fate, if you want." Shaler considered her options. She could continue alone, always one step ahead of discovery. Or she could trust this man who had shown her more kindness in 2 days than she had known in years. It wasn't really a choice. "Yes," she said. "I want your help." And so began Shaler's new life with Tam. He converted his small office into a bedroom for her, giving her privacy she had never known in the facility. During the day, she would help at the clinic, staying in the back rooms to avoid being seen by patients who might report her. In the evenings, Tam would teach her meditation techniques to control her psionic abilities. "The energy comes from your emotions," he explained during one session. "Fear, anger, desperation. They trigger it. But so can focus and calm. The difference is control." Shaler sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed, trying to feel the energy Tam described. I don't understand how to access it without being afraid. Think of it as a river inside you. Tam said, when you're afraid, it floods unpredictably. What we want is to build channels and dams, so you decide when and where the water flows. Day by day, Sheila learned. There were setbacks, plates shattered when she became frustrated, lights flickered when she had nightmares, but Tam never showed fear of her abilities. His steady presence was a balm to years of rejection. Weeks passed, and Sheila began to hope that perhaps she had found a permanent home. But the Purity Directorate was becoming more aggressive in its hunt for anomalies. New drones patrolled the sectors, equipped with advanced scanning technology. Public announcements became more frequent, offering rewards for information. We can't stay here much longer, Tam said one evening, after they had narrowly avoided a drone scan by hiding in the clinic's lead-lined storage room. The Directorate is using new quantum signature detectors. They'll find us eventually. Where can we go? Sheila asked, fear tightening her chest. The upper tiers have even more security. Not up, Tam said. Out, to Viridia. Viridia, the artificial biosphere forest that surrounded Oralis, created to study and preserve Earth's lost ecosystems. It was technically under Directorate control, but its vast size and complex terrain made it difficult to police effectively. It's dangerous, Tam continued. The biosystems are unstable in places, and there are predators, both animal and human. But there's a community there, people who've chosen to live outside Oralis's strict hierarchies. People like me? Sheila asked, hope creeping into her voice. Tam hesitated. Some. Not many hybrids survive to your age, but outcasts of all kinds. People the Directorate has labeled dangerous or useless. When do we leave? Tomorrow night. There's a supply transport I can get us onto. An old colleague works in Viridia now, Lynn. She's an environmental engineer. She'll help us get established. Schiller nodded, already mentally preparing. She had few possessions to pack, just the clothes Tam had given her, and a small crystal he had taught her to use as a focus for her psionic energy. That night, as she lay in bed, Sheila allowed herself to think of her birth parents for the first time in years. Were they still alive? Would she ever find them? The questions that had once tormented her daily now seemed less urgent. Tam had become family, the first real family she had known. The thought of potentially hurting him by seeking her biological parents filled her with guilt. She fell asleep with these thoughts swirling, unaware that their plans were already compromised. The alarm woke them before dawn, a piercing sound from Tam's security system. Directorate forces, Tam said grimly, checking the display. They've cordoned off the block. Someone must have reported us. Scheller felt the familiar pressure building behind her eyes as panic set in. What do we do? We stick to the plan. Just accelerate it. Tam moved with practiced efficiency, gathering their emergency packs. There's a maintenance tunnel under the building. It leads to the outer ring. From there, we can reach the transport platform. They slipped out of the apartment just as the building's main door crashed open below. Tam led Sheila to a utility closet at the end of the hall, revealing a narrow hatch in the floor. They descended into darkness, the sounds of Directorate officers growing fainter above them. The tunnel was cold and damp, barely tall enough for Tam to stand upright. Water dripped from pipes overhead, and the air smelled of mold and chemicals. They moved as quickly as they dared, guided by the dim light of Tam's portable illuminator. Almost there, Tam whispered after what seemed like hours of walking. The exit should be just ahead. But as they approached the end of the tunnel, they heard voices. Directorate officers had anticipated their escape route. Back, Tam hissed, pulling Sheila into a branching tunnel. There's another way. Through the water reclamation system. It's longer. But a beam of light cut through the darkness behind them. Movement detected! Sector C-12! Run! Tam pushed Sheila ahead of him as shots rang out, energy pulses sizzling against the tunnel walls. They ran blindly, taking turns at random, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Sheila's lungs burned, and the pressure behind her eyes intensified. The crystal in her pocket felt hot against her skin. They emerged into a vast chamber filled with massive filtration tanks. Catwalks crisscrossed above the dark water. Tam led her onto one, heading for a door on the far side. Halt! The command echoed through the chamber. Directorate officers poured in from multiple entrances, their weapons trained on Tam and Sheila. Keep moving, Tam whispered, positioning himself between Sheila and the officers. When you reach the door, run. Don't look back. I won't leave you, Sheila protested. You must find Lynn in Viridia. Tell her I sent you. Citizen Nguyen Tom, a amplified voice announced. You are charged with harboring a genetic anomaly and resisting Directorate authority. Surrender the hybrid for processing. Tam stepped forward, hands raised. She's a child, he called back. She's harmed no one. The anomaly poses a biosecurity threat, the voice responded. This is your final warning. Sheila saw Tam's shoulders tense. He was going to sacrifice himself for her. The realization broke something inside her, the dam she had been carefully building to contain her psionic energy. No! She screamed, and power exploded outward from her body. The energy manifested as a visible shockwave, rippling through the air. Officers were thrown backward, lights shattered. The catwalk beneath them groaned and swayed. Sheila, control it! Tam's voice seemed distant through the roaring in her ears. But she couldn't. Years of suppressed fear and anger had found an outlet. The tanks around them cracked, water spilling onto the chamber floor. Metal twisted and warped. Tam grabbed her shoulders, his face inches from hers. Breathe, he commanded. Focus on my voice. You can control this. Sheila struggled to obey, focusing on Tam's familiar features. Gradually, the roaring subsided, the pressure behind her eyes easing, but the damage was done. The chamber was in chaos, water rising rapidly as the tanks continued to rupture. We need to move, Tam said, looking around at the destruction. Now. They ran across the buckling catwalk, reaching the door just as the structure behind them collapsed into the rising water. The corridor beyond was mercifully empty, the officers either incapacitated by Sheila's outburst or focused on damage control. They navigated a maze of maintenance passages, eventually emerging onto a loading platform at the very edge of Aralis. Transport vehicles moved steadily between the city and Viridia, carrying supplies and personnel. That one. Tam pointed to a large cargo hauler being loaded with equipment. It's heading to the Northern Research Station. We can hide among the crates. They waited for a moment when the loading crew was distracted, then slipped aboard, concealing themselves behind large containers marked with biohazard symbols. The irony wasn't lost on Sheila, hiding among things deemed dangerous by the society that rejected her. As the transport hummed to life and began moving away from Aralis, Sheila finally allowed herself to relax slightly. I'm sorry, she whispered to Tam. I lost control. Tam shook his head. You saved us, and now we know what we're dealing with. Your abilities are stronger than I anticipated. Is that bad? It's challenging. Tam looked troubled. The Directorate will have recorded the energy signature. They'll be more determined than ever to find you. Sheila hugged her knees to her chest. Will we ever be safe? Tam didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was gentle but honest. I don't know, but we'll be safer in Viridia than in Aralis. And you won't be alone anymore. The journey to Viridia took several hours. The transport moved slowly through the protective dome that separated Oralis's controlled atmosphere from the experimental ecosystems beyond. Shaler watched through a small viewport as the sterile architecture of the city gave way to green. Viridia was like nothing she had ever seen, created as a living laboratory. It contained recreations of Earth's lost biomes, forests, wetlands, grasslands, all carefully monitored and maintained by environmental engineers. The transport passed over a dense canopy of trees, their leaves shimmering with an unnatural luminescence. Bioluminescent modification, Tam explained, seeing her wonder. They engineered the plants to produce their own light, reducing the need for artificial illumination. The transport docked at a research station built into the side of an artificial mountain. Tam and Sheeler waited until the cargo was being unloaded before slipping away, avoiding the station personnel and heading into the forest. Lynn's outpost is 10 kilometers north, Tam said, consulting a small navigation device. We should reach it by nightfall if we maintain a steady pace. The forest was both beautiful and unsettling. The trees towered overhead, their trunks wider than Shaler was tall. Bioluminescent fungi grew in patches, casting an eerie blue glow. Strange calls echoed among the branches, birds and other creatures, descendants of Earth species modified to survive in this new environment. As they walked, Tam explained more about Viridia's creation. After the ecological collapse, preserving genetic diversity became a priority. Viridia was designed as an ark of sorts, containing as many salvaged species as possible, but it's also an experiment in adaptation. The scientists wanted to see how life would evolve in a controlled setting. What about the people who live here? Sheeler asked. The community you mentioned? They weren't part of the original plan, Tam admitted. Most are refugees from Oralis's stricter policies, scientists who disagreed with directorate methods, citizens who couldn't afford life in the city, people with genetic modifications who faced discrimination. They formed settlements in the less monitored areas. The directorate tolerates them because they help maintain the ecosystems and provide valuable observation data. They traveled deeper into the forest, following what appeared to be a trail, though it was barely distinguishable from the surrounding undergrowth. As darkness fell, the bioluminescence intensified, bathing everything in ghostly light. Despite the beauty, Sheeler felt increasingly uneasy. Something's watching us, she whispered to Tam. He nodded, his expression grim. I've noticed. Stay close. They picked up their pace, but the sensation of being stalked only grew stronger. Suddenly, a low growl emanated from the undergrowth to their right. Tam pushed Sheeler behind him as a creature emerged onto the path. It resembled a wolf, but larger, with a sleeker build and elongated snout. Its fur was a deep indigo, almost black in the dim light, and its eyes glowed an unnatural amber. Canis lupus novus, Tam said quietly. A neo-wolf. Don't run. They're engineered to chase fleeing prey. The wolf-like creature growled again, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Behind it, more amber eyes appeared in the darkness. Tam, Shaler whispered, terror constricting her throat. There are more of them. I see them. Tam's voice remained calm, though Sheeler could feel his tension. When I count to 3, I want you to climb the tree behind us. I'll distract them. But no arguments. 1, 2. Before Tam could reach 3, the lead neo-wolf lunged. Sheeler screamed. And once again, her psionic energy surged. This time, however, it manifested differently. Instead of an explosive wave, it formed a barrier between them and the creatures, visible as a shimmering distortion in the air. The neo-wolf slammed into the barrier and recoiled, snarling in confusion. Its pack mates circled warily, testing the invisible wall with cautious paws. "How are you doing that?" Tam asked, amazement evident in his voice. "I don't know," Sheeler gasped, feeling the strain of maintaining the barrier. "But I can't hold it for long." As if in response to her words, the barrier flickered. One of the neo-wolves immediately charged the weakening spot, only to be knocked back by a blast of energy from above. "Up here!" a voice called. Sheeler and Tam looked up to see a figure perched on a branch overhead, holding what appeared to be a modified pulse rifle. The barrier was impressive, but these aren't ordinary predators, the figure said, firing another blast that scattered the pack. "They're persistent. Follow me if you want to live." The figure, a woman, Sheeler now realized, swung down from the branch with practiced ease, landing lightly beside them. She was tall and lean, with close-cropped black hair and skin darkened by sun exposure. Her clothing was practical, reinforced fabric in forest greens and browns, with numerous pockets and attachments. "Lynn?" Tam asked hesitantly. The woman's eyes widened in recognition. "Tam? What are you doing in Viridia?" Her gaze shifted to Sheeler, taking in her non-human features. "Ah, I see." "We need your help," Tam said. "The Directorate is after us." Lynn grimaced. "When are they not after someone?" She gestured for them to follow. "My outpost is just ahead. We can talk there." As they hurried through the forest, the neo-wolves kept pace at a distance, unwilling to approach while Lynn's weapon remained trained on them. Eventually, they reached a clearing containing a structure that seemed to grow from the forest itself, a building formed of living trees, their branches woven together to create walls and a roof, reinforced with synthetic materials where necessary. "Home sweet home," Lynn said, ushering them inside. "It's not much, but it's off the Directorate's regular patrol routes." The interior was surprisingly spacious and well-equipped. One half contained scientific instruments and monitoring screens displaying data about the forest ecosystem. The other half was living space, a small kitchen, sleeping areas separated by woven screens, and a central gathering area with cushions arranged around a low table. "Sit," Lynn said, securing the entrance before joining them. "You look exhausted, especially the little one." Sheeler bristled slightly at being called little one, but was too tired to protest. The use of her psionic abilities had drained her more than she realized. Lynn prepared a simple meal of synthesized protein and real vegetables grown in a small garden adjacent to the outpost. As they ate, Tam explained their situation. Sheeler's abilities, the confrontation with the Directorate, their desperate escape. "So you need a place to hide," Lynn summarized when he had finished. "Viridia is a good choice, but not perfect. The Directorate doesn't maintain a constant presence here, but they conduct regular sweeps, especially after incidents like the one you described." "Can you help us reach the community you mentioned?" Tam asked. "The settlers?" Lynn hesitated. "They're cautious about newcomers, especially those with connections to Oralis. But," she looked at Sheeler thoughtfully, "a hybrid with psionic abilities might interest them, especially Tui Van." "Tui Van?" Sheeler asked, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. "The leader of the Life Preservation Society," Lynn explained. "She was one of Viridia's original designers before she fell out with the Directorate over the direction of the project. She believes in true biodiversity, including acceptance of genetic variation in humans." "She sounds like someone we need to meet," Tam said. Lynn nodded. "I'll contact her in the morning. For now. You both need rest. The settlement is several days' journey from here." She showed them to sleeping areas, simple pallets with surprisingly comfortable bedding made from processed plant fibers. Despite her exhaustion, Sheila found sleep elusive. The events of the day replayed in her mind. The desperate escape, the unleashing of her power, the strange new world of Viridia. And beneath it all, a growing question. What was she becoming? The psionic energy had always frightened her, but today, it had protected them. It had responded not just to her fear, but to her desire to save Tam. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. Tam had become more than just a protector or mentor to her. He had become family, the first person to accept her completely, abilities and all. The thought of losing him, as he had lost his son, was unbearable. His son. Tam rarely spoke of him, but Shaler had seen the pain in his eyes when he mentioned the boy, taken by the Directorate for research. Was he still alive? Could he be found? The question swirled in Sheeler's mind as she finally drifted into uneasy sleep. Morning in Viridia brought a symphony of animal calls and the gentle rustle of leaves. Sheeler woke to find Lynn already active, checking data on her monitoring screens while sipping a steaming beverage. "Good morning," Lynn said without turning. "Your guardian is already outside, examining my medicinal garden. He seems impressed." Scheller stretched, feeling soreness in muscles unaccustomed to yesterday's exertions. "Have you contacted Tuivan?" "Yes. She's intrigued by my description of you both. She's sending an escort to guide us to the settlement." Lynn finally turned to face Sheeler, her expression thoughtful. "That barrier you created yesterday, have you done that before?" Scheller shook her head. "I've moved objects, made lights flicker. Once I shattered all the windows in a room, but never a shield like that." "Interesting. Your abilities are evolving." Lynn offered her a cup of the same beverage she was drinking, some kind of herbal tea. "Tuivan will want to know more about that." "Is she going to experiment on me?" Shaler asked bluntly, fear edging her voice. Lynn's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with understanding. "No, that's not her way. She believes all variations, genetic, psionic, whatever, are part of natural evolution. She studies. Yes, but always with consent and respect." Somewhat reassured, Shaler sipped the tea, finding its bitter taste oddly pleasant. "What will happen if the Directorate finds us here?" Lynn's expression darkened. "Let's focus on reaching the settlement first. It's better protected than my outpost." They spent the day preparing for the journey. Lynn provided them with appropriate clothing for Viridia's environment, lightweight but durable, with special coatings to repel the more aggressive insects and plant toxins. She also instructed Sheelar in basic forest safety. "Never touch anything glowing red," she warned. "Blue or green luminescence is usually safe, but red indicates toxicity. And always listen for the warning call of the sentinel birds. A 3-note descending whistle means predators are near." Tam absorbed the information with the methodical precision of a scientist, asking detailed questions about the ecosystem. His medical background gave him particular interest in Viridia's pharmacological potential. "Some of these plants have properties we've only dreamed of in Oralis," he told Sheeler excitedly after exploring Lynn's garden. "Natural antibiotics, cellular regenerators. They could revolutionize medicine if the Directorate would only share them." "That's exactly why Tuivan left," Lynn said. "The Directorate sees Viridia as a resource to be exploited, not a model for coexistence." The escort arrived as evening approached, a tall, muscular woman with intricate tattoos covering her visible skin. She introduced herself simply as May, offering no further information about herself or the settlement. Her demeanor was professional, but not unfriendly. "We leave at dawn," she announced. "The journey takes 4 days if we maintain a good pace. We'll travel along the ridgelines where possible. Fewer predators." They spent the night making final preparations. Lynn would accompany them part of the way before returning to her outpost to maintain her official duties as an environmental monitor. The pretense of normalcy was important, she explained, to avoid arousing Directorate suspicion. As promised, they set out at first light. The forest looked different in the morning, less mysterious, though no less beautiful. The bioluminescence had faded, replaced by dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. Birds with iridescent plumage flitted between branches, their calls creating a constant backdrop of sound. May set a brisk pace, leading them along barely visible trails that wound through the dense vegetation. She moved with the confidence of someone born to the forest, though Tam quietly informed Shaler that all of Viridia's human inhabitants were transplants. The biosphere was less than a century old. "The people here have adapted quickly," he murmured as they walked. "They've developed their own culture, distinct from Oralis. You'll see when we reach the settlement." The journey was arduous, but not unpleasant. Each night, they made camp in locations May deemed secure, once in the hollow of a massive tree, another time on a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. Shaler found herself growing stronger, her body adapting to the physical demands. More surprisingly, her psionic abilities seemed to stabilize. The pressure behind her eyes that had been a constant companion faded to a manageable awareness. "It's the environment," Lynn suggested when Sheeler mentioned this on the second day. "Oralis is full of electromagnetic interference and quantum fluctuations. Here, the energy patterns are more natural, more aligned with biological rhythms." On the third day, Lynn bid them farewell, returning to her outpost with promises to visit the settlement when she could. Her departure left Sheelar feeling unexpectedly bereft. Despite their brief acquaintance, the environmental engineer had become a reassuring presence. "She'll be fine," Tam assured Shaler, noticing her concern. "Lynn has survived in Viridia for years. She knows how to avoid the Directorate." They continued their journey, now guided solely by May. The terrain began to change, the forest giving way to a vast meadow dotted with crystalline formations that captured and refracted sunlight, creating rainbows that danced across the grass. "The light fields," May said, breaking her usual taciturnity. "We're getting close to home." Beyond the meadow, they entered a different kind of forest, older, denser, with trees whose trunks spiraled upward in impossible configurations. Homes had been built among these trees, structures that seemed to grow from the living wood rather than being imposed upon it. "Welcome to Harmony," May said, "the primary settlement of the Life Preservation Society." People emerged from the structures to watch their arrival. Shaler was struck by their diversity. Some appeared fully human. Others showed subtle signs of genetic modification or adaptation to Viridia's environment. None recoiled at the sight of her, though many regarded her with open curiosity. May led them to a central clearing where a large, circular building stood. Unlike the other structures, this one was partly constructed of salvaged materials from Oralis, metal and synthetic composites integrated with living wood. "The council chamber," May explained. "Tuivan is waiting for you there." The interior of the chamber was cool and dimly lit, with a central fire pit providing both light and warmth. Around the pit were arranged seats of varying designs, some clearly built to accommodate non-standard physiologies. At the far side sat a woman whose presence commanded attention despite her small stature. Tuivan appeared to be in her 60s, her hair a striking silver against dark skin. Her eyes, however, were unnervingly youthful, alert and intensely curious. She wore simple clothing similar to what everyone in Harmony seemed to favor: distinguished only by a pendant of what appeared to be amber, encasing a small insect. "Dr. Nguyen Tam," she said, her voice carrying easily across the chamber. "It's been many years. I remember your work on xenobiotic integration. Brilliant, if controversial." Tam bowed slightly. "Director Van, I'm honored you remember me." "Former director," she corrected with a slight smile. "And this must be Shaler." Her gaze shifted to the girl, assessing but not unkind. "Lynn told me about your abilities. Quite remarkable for one so young." Shaler shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. "I don't control them very well," she admitted. "Few do, at first," Tui Van replied. "That's why education is so important, something the directorate fails to understand." She gestured for them to be seated. "Tell me, why have you come to Viridia? Simply to escape the directorate? Or do you seek something more?" "Safety, primarily," Tam answered. "Sheeler needs a place where she can develop without fear of persecution. And you?" Tui Van's penetrating gaze remained on Tom. "What do you seek, Doctor?" Tam hesitated. "A chance to continue my work. Perhaps to help others like Sheeler. And..." He paused, pain flickering across his features. "Information, if possible, about my son. He was taken for directorate research 5 years ago." Tui Van's expression softened slightly. "Many have lost loved ones to the directorate's research. Some have found their way to us eventually." She didn't offer false hope, but her words carried a hint of possibility that made Tam straighten. "As for you, young Sheeler," she continued, "Harmony could indeed provide sanctuary. We have others with psionic potential here, though none who manifested as young as you. You could learn much from them, and they from you." "Can you really protect us?" Sheeler asked bluntly. "The directorate has advanced technology, weapons." "We have our own protections," Tui Van interrupted, a hint of steel entering her voice. "Viridia itself is our greatest ally. The ecosystem responds to threats in ways the directorate has never fully understood. And we have other advantages." She glanced at May, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "You're welcome to stay." Tui Van concluded. "May will show you to quarters where you can rest. Tomorrow, we'll discuss your integration into our community more fully." As they were led from the chamber, Shaler felt a curious mixture of relief and apprehension. They had found sanctuary, at least temporarily. But she sensed that life in Harmony would bring its own challenges. Their quarters were in a living structure similar to Lynn's outpost, but larger and more refined. The interior walls were lined with a luminescent moss that provided gentle illumination. The furniture was minimal, but comfortable, crafted from sustainable materials. "This is actually nicer than our apartment in Oralis," Tam remarked, examining the space with approval. "It doesn't feel real," Sheeler said, sitting on the edge of a sleeping platform. "After everything that's happened, to just be safe suddenly." "I understand the feeling," Tam said, sitting beside her. "But we should make the most of this opportunity. Tui Van is a powerful ally, and the society has resources we couldn't access in Oralis." "Do you think they know anything about your son?" Sheeler asked carefully, watching Tam's face. Pain flashed in his eyes, quickly suppressed. "Perhaps. But I can't allow myself to hope too much. The important thing now is your safety and development." Scheller wanted to protest that his goals mattered too, but she remained silent. Tam had sacrificed so much for her already. She wouldn't add to his burden with her concerns. Life in Harmony proved to be both more structured and more fluid than Scheller had anticipated. The community operated on principles of mutual support and responsibility. Everyone contributed according to their abilities and received according to their needs. Children, there were surprisingly many, divided their time between formal education and practical learning through community participation. Shayler was integrated into a learning cohort with 5 other children her age. Unlike in Oralis, her hybrid features attracted curiosity rather than revulsion. One of her cohort mates, a boy named Kai, even had visible non-human characteristics himself, subtle gill-like structures on his neck that allowed him to extract oxygen from water. My grandmother was modified for oceanic research, he explained matter-of-factly when Shayler asked. The traits were supposed to be non-hereditary, but genetic engineering isn't as precise as they claim. Tam, meanwhile, found purpose in Harmony's medical center. His expertise in xenobiology made him valuable to the community, which faced unique health challenges due to Viridia's experimental ecosystem. He worked closely with other medical practitioners, sharing knowledge from Oralis while learning Harmony's more holistic approaches. For the first time in her life, Shayler experienced something approaching normalcy. She had routine, education, and social interaction that didn't revolve around hiding her true nature. Most importantly, she had guidance in understanding and controlling her psionic abilities. The society included several individuals with similar talents, though none as powerful as what Shayler had demonstrated during their escape. Under their tutelage, she learned to channel the energy consciously rather than reflexively. The pressure behind her eyes became a tool rather than a threat. Psionic energy isn't supernatural, explained her primary instructor, an elderly man named Juan. It's a natural phenomenon, the ability to manipulate quantum fields through biological processes. Just as your muscles move your body through physical space, your psionic center moves energy through probability space. The technical explanations often went over Shayler's head, but the practical exercises helped. She learned to create controlled manifestations, small force fields, directed kinetic pulses, even subtle manipulations of electromagnetic fields that allowed limited communication with Viridia's more advanced technology. Weeks passed, and Shayler began to believe that perhaps they had truly escaped the Directorate's reach. Tam seemed to share her optimism, his demeanor lightening as he became more integrated into Harmony's community. He even began to speak more openly about his son, sharing memories with Shayler in quiet evening conversations. Min was always curious, he told her one night, as they sat watching the bioluminescent insects that floated through Harmony after dark. Even as a toddler, he wanted to understand how everything worked. When the xenomorph pandemic hit, he insisted on helping me in the treatment centers, despite the risks. Is that how he developed psionic abilities? Shayler asked. Through exposure? Tam nodded. We think so. The xenomorph biofluids can trigger neurological changes in humans, with certain genetic predispositions. Min's manifested gradually, subtle at first, then increasingly obvious. I tried to help him hide it. But the Directorate found out. Shayler finished for him. Yes, someone at his school reported unusual incidents. They came in the night. Said he was being taken for observation and treatment. Tam's voice grew tight. My wife, Hua, tried to stop them. There was a struggle. She was injured severely. By the time I got her to a medical facility, it was too late. I'm so sorry, Shayler whispered, aching for his loss. Tam was quiet for a moment. After that, I dedicated myself to understanding psionic phenomena, hoping I might help others like Min. That's when the Directorate revoked my license. They claimed my research was promoting dangerous mutations. But really, they feared what I might discover. The revelation deepened Shayler's understanding of Tom's dedication to her cause. He wasn't just being kind. He was continuing a mission born from personal tragedy. The knowledge created a new weight of responsibility. She needed to master her abilities, not just for her own safety, but to honor Tam's sacrifice and continue his work. Their peaceful existence in harmony was shattered 3 months after their arrival. The warning came in the pre-dawn hours, a series of low, resonating tones that echoed through the settlement, rousing everyone from sleep. "Directorate patrols," May explained tersely when she arrived at their quarters. "A large contingent, approaching from the north. They're conducting a systematic sweep of Viridia, sector by sector." "Looking for us?" Sheeler asked, fear clutching at her throat. "Possibly. Or it could be routine intimidation. Either way, we need to implement containment protocols." May handed Tam a small communication device. "Tuivan requests your presence at the medical center. We may have casualties before this is over." "And Sheeler?" Tam asked, already gathering his medical kit. "She comes with me to the sanctuary." May replied, "All psionic-capable individuals are being gathered there for protection and potential defense." The sanctuary turned out to be an underground chamber beneath the council building, accessed through a hidden entrance concealed by living roots. The space was surprisingly large and well-equipped, with reinforced walls and independent power systems. About 20 people were already gathered there, ranging from children younger than Sheelar to elderly individuals like Juan. "We've been preparing for this possibility," Juan told Sheelar as they took positions around a central monitoring station. "The Directorate conducts sweeps periodically, but this one is larger than usual. They may have specific targets." "Us," Sheeler said grimly. "They're looking for Tam and me." Han nodded. "Perhaps. Or perhaps they've detected the increased psionic activity from your training. Either way, our job is to maintain the settlement's protective barrier." "Barrier?" Sheeler asked, confused. "Like what I created against the Neo-Wolves." "Similar, but on a much larger scale. Together, those of us with psionic abilities can generate a field that masks life signs and disrupts scanning technology. It won't stop a direct physical assault, but it prevents detection from a distance." The process was exhausting. Each person contributed to the collective field, channeling their energy through a central focus, a crystalline structure at the center of the sanctuary that amplified and stabilized their combined output. Sheeler found her considerable raw power difficult to integrate with the others' more refined contributions, but Juan guided her, showing her how to modulate her output. Hours passed as the Directorate forces moved through Viridia. Through the monitoring systems, they could track the patrol's progress, methodical and thorough, sweeping outward from Oralis in an expanding spiral. "They're approaching the light fields," someone announced tensely. 2 kilometers from the settlement perimeter." Sheeler felt the collective effort intensify. Her head pounded with the strain of maintaining her contribution to the barrier. Through the pain, a terrifying thought emerged. What if the Directorate had developed technology that could detect their protective field? What if the very thing meant to conceal them became a beacon? As if in answer to her fears, alarms suddenly blared throughout the sanctuary. "Perimeter breach," Juan announced grimly. "They've found us." The next hours were chaos. The sanctuary emptied as those with combat training moved to defend the settlement. Sheeler wanted to help, but Juan insisted she remain protected. "Your abilities are still too uncontrolled for combat," he told her firmly. "You could harm allies as easily as enemies. Forced to wait in safety while others risked themselves." Sheeler felt the familiar pressure building behind her eyes, not from psionic exertion this time, but from helpless tears. Her thoughts turned to Tam, out there in the medical center, potentially in the direct path of the Directorate forces. When the door to the sanctuary burst open, Shaler prepared for the worst. Instead, it was May, bloodied, but standing tall. "We need you," she said directly to Shaler. "The eastern perimeter is failing. Tam is there, treating the wounded. If the Directorate breaks through, they'll take him first." Hunt protested, but Shaler was already moving. "Tell me what to do," she said to May. The scene at the eastern perimeter was nightmarish. The Directorate had deployed combat drones that fired suppression pulses, designed to incapacitate rather than kill. They wanted prisoners, not corpses. Harmony's defenders used the environment as their primary weapon, triggering defensive responses from Viridia's more aggressive flora. But they were being pushed back steadily. Tam had established a field treatment area just behind the defensive line, working frantically to stabilize the injured. He looked up as Shaler approached, his face registering shock and then anger. "You shouldn't be here," he said harshly, hands never stopping their work on a wounded defender. "It's too dangerous." "I can help," Shaler insisted. "My barrier. I can protect you. Protect all of you." "You don't have enough control," Tam argued. "The strain could—" He never finished the sentence. A drone broke through the defensive line, its sensors locking onto Tam immediately. The Directorate had facial recognition technology. They knew exactly who they were looking for. The drone fired, without thinking. Shaler threw herself forward, hands outstretched. The psionic energy exploded from her in a controlled wave, forming a shimmering barrier that absorbed the pulse. The effort sent pain lancing through her skull, but she maintained the shield, expanding it to cover the entire treatment area. "Get everyone back!" she gasped to Tam. "I can't hold this long!" For once, Tam didn't argue. He organized a swift evacuation of the wounded, moving them deeper into the settlement. The drone continued firing, joined by others that converged on Shaler's position, recognizing her as the primary threat. The barrage was relentless. Shaler felt her control slipping as exhaustion set in. The barrier flickered, allowing one pulse through that struck a nearby tree, causing it to convulse and release a cloud of spores. The defensive flora of Viridia was activating in response to the threat, just as Shaler thought she couldn't maintain the barrier another second. Reinforcements arrived, Huan and the other psionics from the sanctuary, forming a circle around her. "Together," Huan commanded, and Shaler felt their energies joining with hers, strengthening the barrier and expanding it outward. The combined psionic force pushed the drones back, creating a momentary respite. In that brief calm, Tuivan herself appeared, accompanied by what appeared to be Viridia's final defense, humans working in concert with the biosphere itself, directing plants and modified animals in coordinated attacks against the Directorate forces. "We've confirmed their objective," Tuivan said, her calm voice belying the gravity of the situation. "They're specifically tracking psionic signatures, yours in particular. Shaler. The Directorate has declared all psionic-capable individuals to be seized for public safety." "They can't take her," Tam said fiercely, returning to Shaler's side. "I won't let them." "None of us will," Tuivan agreed. "But we need to end this confrontation decisively. The Directorate must understand that Harmony is not just another outpost to be raided at will." Her plan was audacious. Instead of continuing to hide their psionic abilities, they would demonstrate them openly, prove that they could control these powers and use them constructively. The display would be recorded and transmitted throughout Auralis, forcing public acknowledgement of what the Directorate had been denying for years. "It's risky," Tam cautioned. "Exposure could make Shaler an even bigger target. Or it could make her too visible to disappear quietly," Tuivan countered. "The Directorate operates best in shadows. We're going to drag this into the light." The plan required Shaler to do something she had never attempted, to amplify her abilities through Viridia's own crystalline formations, creating a display visible even from Oralis. It would tax her beyond anything she had experienced, but with the support of the other psionics, it might be possible. "I'll do it," Shaler said firmly, before Tam could object further. "If it means we can stop hiding, stop running, I'll do whatever it takes." The confrontation reached its climax at the center of the light fields, where the crystalline formations were densest. The Directorate forces had been contained, but not defeated, maintaining a perimeter around the area. Their commander, a stern-faced woman with the insignia of the Purity Directorate prominent on her uniform, stood at the front of their formation. "This is your final warning," she announced through an amplification system. "Surrender the hybrid designated Sheeler and all individuals exhibiting psionic anomalies, or we will employ lethal force." Tuivan stepped forward, her small figure somehow commanding in the face of the Directorate's military might. "We will not surrender anyone," she replied, her voice carrying easily across the space between them. "Instead, we offer evidence of what you have denied for decades, that psionic abilities are not a threat, but a natural evolution of human potential." She gestured, and Sheeler moved to the center of the field, surrounded by the other psionic-capable members of Harmony. Tam stood slightly apart, his expression torn between pride and terror for her safety. Following Juan's guidance, Sheeler reached for her power, feeling it surge in response to her call. This time, instead of forming a barrier, she directed the energy outward, into the crystalline formations around them. The crystals began to glow, first softly, then with increasing brilliance as they amplified the psionic energy. The effect was spectacular. The light fields became a symphony of color and light, patterns forming and reforming in harmony with Sheeler's thoughts. The other psionics joined their energy to hers, each contributing unique variations to the display. The combined effect created not just light, but sound, harmonic resonances that seemed to touch something primal in all who heard them. The Directorate forces wavered, their discipline momentarily broken by the unexpected beauty of the display. Even their commander seemed transfixed, her stern expression softening into something like wonder. Taking advantage of the moment, Tuivan stepped forward again. "This is what you fear," she called to the commander. "Not destruction, but creation. Not chaos, but harmony. The psionic potential represents the next step in our adaptation to a changed world, one where humans can interact directly with their environment, as we were always meant to." The commander hesitated, visibly conflicted. "My orders are clear," she finally said, though with less conviction. "All psionic anomalies are to be contained for study." "And who issued those orders?" Tam stepped forward now, his voice carrying the authority of his scientific background. "The same directorate that has been experimenting on children like my son for years? The same organization that calls itself the Purity Directorate, while creating the very modifications it claims to fear." His words struck a chord. Murmurs spread through the Directorate ranks. Many of the officers and soldiers were just following orders, with little understanding of the larger political machinations behind them. "I have evidence," Tam continued, pressing his advantage. "Records of the Directorate's own psionic development program. They don't fear these abilities. They want to control them, weaponize them." This was news even to Sheeler. She maintained the energy flow into the crystals, but part of her attention shifted to Tam. Had he been keeping secrets from her? The commander's communication device chimed. She listened briefly, her expression hardening. "Stand down," she finally ordered her forces. "We're withdrawing to perimeter positions." As the Directorate forces retreated, Scheller carefully reduced the energy flow, allowing the crystal display to fade gradually. The effort had drained her to the point of near collapse. Only Huan's supporting arm kept her upright. "Is it over?" she asked weakly. "Not entirely," Tuivan replied, her expression guardedly optimistic. "But we've achieved something significant today. The display was transmitted throughout Oralis. The public has seen what the Directorate has tried to hide. They can't simply make us disappear now without answering difficult questions." The immediate crisis had passed, but the implications were just beginning to unfold. Back in Harmony, as Sheila recovered from the enormous energy expenditure, Tam finally explained what he had been concealing. "I didn't have actual evidence of the Directorate's program," he admitted, "but I knew it existed. Before my license was revoked, I was approached to join it, to help develop psionic abilities in controlled subjects. I refused, which is part of why they took Min. He was both punishment and leverage." "You lied to the commander," Sheila said, surprised. The Tam she knew was meticulously honest. "I created doubt," he corrected. "Enough doubt to make her hesitate, to make her superiors reconsider a direct assault that would now be very public." He sighed heavily. "The Directorate operates on secrecy and fear. By bringing their actions into the open, we've limited their options." The following days were tense, but without further confrontation. The Directorate forces maintained their perimeter around Viridia, but did not attempt another incursion. Meanwhile, reports filtered in from contacts in Oralis. The transmission of the psionic display had indeed caused a sensation. Public opinion was divided. But for the first time, there was open discussion of psionic abilities and the Directorate's policies regarding genetic diversity. A week after the confrontation, Tuivan called Tom and Shaler to the council chamber. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood a young man with features that immediately struck Shaler as familiar. The same thoughtful eyes as Tom, the same determined set to his jaw. "Min," Tam whispered, frozen in disbelief. The young man stepped forward hesitantly. "Father," he said, his voice deeper than Tam might have remembered, but unmistakably his son's. Their reunion was both joyous and painful. Min had escaped the Directorate facility during the confusion following the public transmission of Harmony's psionic display. He had made his way to Viridia, guided by rumors and hope, finding the settlement just as the Directorate forces were withdrawing. "I was never the only one," Min explained when the emotional first moments had passed. "There were dozens of us in the facility, all with different degrees of psionic potential. The Directorate was studying us, yes, but also training some as operatives." "And you?" Tam asked, still holding his son's arm as if afraid he might disappear. "I was considered too unpredictable for field work," Min said with a hint of pride. "My abilities are strong, but inconsistent, and I never stopped resisting their methods." The reunion was bittersweet for Shaler. She was genuinely happy for Tam, but it raised again the question of her own origins. Did she have parents somewhere who missed her as Tam had missed Min? Or had she been created in a laboratory, as some hybrids were rumored to be? As if sensing her thoughts, Tam included her in the embrace. "Min, this is Shaler. She's been—" He paused, searching for the right words. "My daughter," he finished firmly, "in every way that matters." The declaration brought tears to Sheeler's eyes. She had found family after all, not through birth, but through choice and love. The arrival of Min coincided with a shift in the political landscape. The public revelation of psionic abilities and the Directorate's secretive programs had created pressure for reform. Tuivan, with her political experience and connections, became a key figure in negotiations between Harmony and Oralis authorities. "The Directorate is being restructured," she announced during a community gathering a month after the confrontation. "Its more extreme elements are being removed from power. There's talk of establishing a new body to address genetic diversity and psionic development, one that includes representatives from Viridia. Will we be safe? Someone asked from the crowd. Safer, Tu Ivan replied honestly. Not perfectly safe, not yet, but the path is opening toward acceptance rather than fear. As part of this new approach, Sheeler was invited to become a youth representative to the nascent Genetic Diversity Council. It was a largely symbolic position at first, but the symbolism itself was powerful. A hybrid child with psionic abilities, publicly acknowledged and respected. You don't have to accept, Tam told her when the invitation came. You've already done more than enough. Sheeler considered her options carefully. The role would mean dividing her time between Harmony and Oralis, between the safety of her new home and the challenges of the city that had rejected her. But it would also mean helping others like her, children born different in a world still learning to embrace diversity. I want to do it, she decided. If I can help change things, even a little, it's worth it. Min agreed to accompany her on her journeys to Oralis, providing both protection and guidance. His years in the directorate facility had given him insights into the politics and personalities involved. Together, they became an effective team, navigating the complex transition toward a more inclusive society. The changes were not without resistance. There were still those in Oralis who feared difference, who clung to outdated notions of human purity. There were protests and occasional violence, but there was also growing support, especially among the younger generation who had seen the beauty of the psionic display and wondered what other wonders might be possible in a world that embraced diversity. A year after their desperate flight from Oralis, Shaler stood on a platform in the city's central plaza, addressing a gathering of citizens from all tiers. Tom and Min watched from nearby, pride evident in their expressions. Tu Ivan stood on the platform with her, lending the weight of her authority to the occasion. I was born different, Sheeler began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. Not fully human, not fully alien, but something in between. For years, I was taught to be ashamed of that difference, to hide it, to wish it away. I was treated as a threat simply for existing. She paused, looking out at the mixed crowd, some hostile, some curious, some openly supportive. But difference isn't a threat, she continued. It's an opportunity to see the world through new eyes, to discover capabilities we never imagined, to adapt to a changing universe. That's what life has always done. Adapted, evolved, found new ways to thrive. The crowd was silent, listening. Sheeler felt the familiar pressure behind her eyes, but now it was a comfort rather than a fear. Her psionic ability had become an integral part of her, neither a curse nor a weapon, but simply another way of interacting with the world. The future belongs to all of us, she concluded. Not just those who fit an arbitrary definition of pure, but all who share this city, this world, this moment in time. Together, we can build that future, one where a child like me isn't cast out, but welcomed for the unique perspective she brings. As she stepped back from the podium, applause broke out, tentative at first, then growing stronger, not universal, not complete acceptance, but a beginning, a recognition that change was not just inevitable, but potentially beneficial. Tam embraced her as she left the platform. Your mother would have been so proud, he whispered. And for once, the mention of the mother she had never known didn't bring pain, but a sense of connection to a larger history. Later, as they walked through the upper tiers of Oralis, areas that would have been forbidden to Sheeler just a year earlier, Tam pointed out the distant shape of Viridia, visible through the city's transparent dome. Two worlds, he said thoughtfully. For so long, we thought they had to be separate. Auralis with its technology and control. Viridia with its biological diversity and adaptability. But they're parts of the same whole, just as you are. Schiller, a bridge between worlds. Sheeler contemplated this idea as they continued their walk. She had spent so long feeling torn between identities, human and alien, citizen and outcast, child and symbol. But perhaps the answer wasn't to choose one or the other, but to embrace the unique perspective that came from standing between worlds, from being both at once. As night fell over Auralis, the distant forests of Viridia began to glow with bioluminescence, a reminder that beauty could emerge from the darkest places, that life found ways to shine even when the path seemed most challenging. Shaler watched the lights with a sense of peace she had never thought possible. She had found her home, not in a place, but in the people who had chosen her and whom she had chosen in return. She had found her purpose in building bridges between worlds that had too long been divided. And she had found herself, not despite her differences, but because of them, because of the journey they had compelled her to take. The future remained uncertain. There would be setbacks and struggles ahead. But for the first time in her life, Sheeler faced that uncertainty not with fear, but with hope. A hope born from the knowledge that she was no longer alone, that change was possible, and that the differences that had once marked her for exclusion could become the very things that helped create a better world for all. In the moonlight reflecting off Auralis's dome, Shaler smiled. This was just the beginning.